If you're tired of these promos, supporters get the podcast early and ad-free. Just go to donate.bogosity.tv for the links to sign up. Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the week of April 21, 2024. The podcast that sells insurance for software crashes. This is your host, Shane Killian. First, a quick update. A couple of weeks ago, we covered the new Scottish hate crime law and the kinds of problems it was bound to cause. After J.K. Rowling criticized the new law, the ex-Twitterati went screeching about how that was just hysteria. And no, of course, the new law wouldn't do things like that and would only cover the genuine crime of stirring up hatred, whatever that means. Now, the law has been in effect for just a few days, and Police Scotland has already received thousands of complaints, far more than they can process in a reasonable time frame, even after paying their staff overtime. According to Scottish Police Federation General Secretary David Kennedy, the overtime alone would run into hundreds of thousands of pounds. Quote, "There are not a lot of officers on patrol that are getting overly swamped because not a lot of the complaints are turning into actual hate crime investigations. It will be officers sitting and reading through whatever has been sent in to make sure that there is not any hate crime and there is not any other crime being reported. There is overtime getting paid. They wouldn't have acquired it if the new law hadn't come in. They wouldn't have had the extra work. It's going to cost hundreds of thousands of pounds, and we don't have any officers, so I don't care what anybody says, there is a detrimental impact on other parts of the force." Scottish First Minister Humza Yousaf said, quote, "Although there are lots of complaints coming in, a tiny percentage of that are turning into actual investigations. It will all be done within the control room. The control room will be paying extra overtime and using officers from the control room area to do it." Of course, this will just mean they have that much fewer personnel and resources to go after actual crimes. It's just no fun having to keep saying "we told you so." Now let's occidentalize the news of the bogus. The Second Amendment does not say that citizens have the right to keep and bear arms, nor documented or approved of or whatever. It says people, and people are people, regardless of their country of origin or whatever forms they filled out. Now, a federal court has officially recognized this principle. 18 U.S.C. Section 922G says in part, quote, "It shall be unlawful for any person who, being an alien, is illegally or unlawfully in the United States to possess any firearm or ammunition." So prosecutors charged Heriberto Carbajal Flores of illegally carrying a semi-automatic pistol in 2020. U.S. District Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman rejected 2 motions to dismiss, but she granted the third and dismissed the case based on the Supreme Court's decision in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, Inc. v. Bruin. She ruled, "Although the Second Amendment's plain text presumptively protects firearm possession by undocumented persons, that does not end the analysis. Under Bruin, if the government can show that the felon dispossession statute is part of this country's historical tradition of firearm regulation, then the statute survives. Carbajal Flores has never been convicted of a felony, a violent crime, or a crime involving the use of a weapon. Even in the present case, Carbajal Flores contends that he received and used the handguns solely for self-protection and protection of property during a time of undocumented civil unrest in the spring of 2020. Additionally, pretrial services confirmed that Carbajal Flores has consistently adhered to and fulfilled all of the stipulated conditions of his release, is gainfully employed, and has no new arrests or outstanding warrants. The court finds that Carbajal Flores' criminal record, containing no improper use of a weapon, as well as the non-violent circumstances of his arrest, do not support a finding that he poses a risk to public safety such that he cannot be trusted to use a weapon responsibly and should be deprived of his Second Amendment right to bear arms in self-defense. Thus, this court finds that, as applied to Carbajal Flores, Section 922G5 is unconstitutional. The ruling also mentioned the Third Circuit decision in Range v. Lombardo, which found that it was unconstitutional to deprive a person of Second Amendment rights after conviction of a nonviolent crime. It's a different ruling to what a lot of other courts have found, but since it'll most likely be appealed, it'll be interesting to see if it survives, although it should. During the early decades of our country, all sorts of immigrants owned guns without having to be documented or fill out forms or anything else, and all the other side seems to have is special pleading, saying that illegal immigrants don't count as people under the Constitution because they're not part of the political community, or trying to equate it to laws that prevented British loyalists from owning guns, which also had an exception for nonviolent offenders. So we'll have to see what happens on appeal, but at least there's one judge somewhere willing to say the Bill of Rights applies to everyone. If you're looking for a way to support this channel, but you don't have any spare cash and you can't stand ads, you can do so by generating your own cryptocurrency. Use the links at the bottom of the description to follow the link to Odyssey.com to listen to the podcast and see all of my YouTube videos as well. Just watching videos will produce cryptocurrency for the creator and yourself. And since Odyssey is always monetized and never censored, you'll have no problem seeing all the videos from your favorite creators. You can also use the library credits you create at Odyssey to tip creators and even purchase paid content. Earn library credits through various rewards, including daily view rewards and the number of shares and invites. And you can interact with creators in all sorts of ways, including like and dislike, comment, boost a post by supporting it, repost it, and share to other sites, all while earning crypto for the creator. Easily monetize yourself and your favorite creators using cryptocurrency, without advertising. Use the link below to visit this channel on Odyssey.com and see many of your other favorites there as well. You know, in my younger and more naive days, I thought Supreme Court Justice was a job I wasn't in any way qualified for. After listening to oral arguments in Fischer v. United States, I can only conclude that I'm vastly overqualified. I mean, where do they find these people? So anyway, this is one of the J6 defendants, Joseph W. Fischer, who is making the case the J6 defendants were prosecuted under completely the wrong law. 18 U.S.C. Section 512 is titled, Tampering with a Witness, Victim, or an Informant, which none of the J6 defendants were even accused of. Paragraph C reads, Whoever corruptly alters, destroys, mutilates, or conceals a record, document, or other object, or attempts to do so, with the intent to impair the object's integrity or availability for use in an official proceeding, or otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding, or attempts to do so, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. So what they're claiming is that the part that goes, otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding or attempts to do so, applies to what the J6 protesters did because they were attempting to obstruct or influence the certification of electoral votes by Congress. But as you just heard, that's in the context of destroying or tampering with evidence. But the government claims that the word otherwise completely divorces the rest of that clause from everything that came before, and they can cast the net far and wide and use it to prosecute basically whoever they want.
Because of the presence of the otherwise provision. So otherwise, as I mentioned, otherwise, this court has said, means to do similar conduct in a different way. So what we've got here is the impairment of evidence being done in a different way.
I'm sorry. I thought was, yes, doing it in a different way. So let me give you an example. There is a sign on the theater. You will be kicked out of the theater if you photograph or record the actors, or otherwise disrupt the performance. If you start yelling, I think no one would question that you can be expected to be kicked out under this policy, even though yelling has nothing to do with photograph or recording. The object that the verbs are looking at, is the obstruction. It's not the manner in which you obstruct. It's the fact that you've obstructed.
Okay, yeah, we knew Sotomayor was dumb. Basic English isn't her strong suit. But it wasn't just her. Listen to Amy Coney Barrett.
Let's imagine that we agree with you On remand, do you agree that the government could take a shot at proving that your client actually did try to interfere with or under C1, under C2, obstruct evidence because he was trying to obstruct the arrival of the certificates arriving to the vice president's desk for counting?
Even though none of them were intercepted, destroyed, impaired, or anything else. Not even the attempt. I mean, you list a bunch of things. Imagine you've got a piece of paper representing the landscape of things you can do, and so you make a mark of things you prohibit. Destroy evidence, alter evidence, conceal evidence, and so on. So you have all these dots. Now you have the word otherwise. Imagine you draw a circle on the paper just large enough to encompass all the stuff you just prohibited. Everything else inside that circle is now prohibited as well. But what are they talking about with going way outside the circle and putting marks, maybe even on other pieces of paper entirely, and saying that's also covered by the word otherwise just because you can make it fit the grammar? It's idiotic. And if you don't think they're basing this on just grammar, listen to Justice Kagan.
It says otherwise obstructs a proceeding. There are plenty of ways to write the statute that you want to write. You could just say otherwise affects the integrity or availability of evidence in an official proceeding. You could combine official proceeding with evidence in other ways. One with you could replicate the mens rea that C1 has. I mean, there are ways in which C2, multiple ways in which the drafters of C2 could have made it clear that they intended C2 to also operate only in the sphere of evidence spoliation. But it doesn't do that. All it says is otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes.
And she even had the complete lack of awareness to say,
so that's not a great advertisement for rewriting a statute to take an otherwise provision that says what it says and turn it into an otherwise provision that says something else.
Okay. Justice Alito, can you be any more reasonable?
I think that you may be biting off more than you can chew by suggesting, if you are indeed suggesting, that the otherwise clause can only be read the way you read it. One might say it can certainly be read the way the government reads it, and that might even be the more straightforward reading.
Guess not. Let's hear some of Green's response.
I would submit, Your Honor, too, that, as the briefing indicates, Jus Gem Generis and Nocitur Socius, those two venerated Latin canons, also operate in our favor here, as well as the broader context of Chapter 73 and Section 15. All of these things are about doing things that obstruct a proceeding. And 1512 and 1512C zero in on witnesses and evidence. And the government's reading of C2, I remind the court, is so broad that it would cover anyone who does something understanding that what they're doing is wrong in some way, that in any way influences, impedes, or obstructs an official proceeding of any type.
Keep in mind that this law was passed in the wake of the Enron scandal, where Arthur Andersen was accused of destroying evidence to prevent the government from examining it beyond the then required 3-year retainment period. That is what the law was written to prevent. How do they think they can make it be different this time?
We've never had a situation before where there's been a situation like this with people attempting to stop a proceeding violently.
Black Panthers? Weather Underground? Hey, Sonia, what about you look at one of your fellow justices, Brett Kavanaugh, and ask him if he remembers the crowd violently occupying the Capitol building, trying to stop his nomination to that very court? Okay, you get the idea. Let's get to the government's response.
His reading hinges on the word otherwise, but that word means in a different manner, not in the same manner. And the true prohibitions in Section 1512C2 aren't unified items on a list where you could apply associated words canons. They're separate provisions. They have their own sets of verbs and their own nouns.
Wait a minute. We know that voice. It's General Elizabeth Prelogar. Dang, do they have her arguing for all the cases where they want to eviscerate the First Amendment?
General, there have been many violent protests that have interfered with proceedings. Has the government applied this provision to other protests in the past, and has this been the government's position throughout the lifespan of the statute?
Oh my God, thank you, Justice Thomas! Someone with a brain, finally!
It has certainly been the government's position since the enactment of 1512c2 that it covers the myriad forms of obstructing an official proceeding and that it's not limited to some kind of evidence impairment gloss.
Have you enforced it in that manner?
We have enforced it in a variety of prosecutions that don't focus on evidence tampering.
I'll give you the quick answer. No. No, they haven't. That's the gist of her very roundabout answer.
The general phrase is controlled and defined by reference to the terms that precede it. The otherwise phrase is more general, and the terms that precede it are alters, destroys, mutilates, or conceals a record and document. And applying the doctrine as was set forth in that opinion, the specific terms alters, destroy, and mutilate carry forward into 2, and the terms record, document, or other object carry forward into 2 as well. And it seems to me that they, as I said, sort of control and defined the more general term.
Oh my God, Roberts is a voice of reason too?
And the otherwise means in other ways. It alters, destroys, and mutilates record, document, or other objects that impede the investigation, and otherwise, in other ways, accomplishes the same result.
Yeah, the word otherwise literally means in other ways. Look it up. But you know what? I really have to give the epic award to Justice Gorsuch.
What does that mean for the breadth of this statute? Would a sit-in that disrupts a trial or access to a federal courthouse qualify? Would a heckler in today's audience qualify, or at the State of the Union address? Would pulling a fire alarm before a vote qualify for 20 years in federal prison?
Yeah, Prelagar, you gonna arrest Jamal Bowman? Did you pick up on his reference there? Not only did she not get the reference, or saw fit to just ignore it, she went on for quite some time without answering the question. Just to give you a taste.
The kind of built-in limitations are the things that I think would potentially suggest that many of those things wouldn't be something the government could charge or prove as 1512c2 beyond a reasonable doubt, would include the fact that the actus reus does require obstruction, which we understand to be a meaningful interference. So that means that if you have some minor disruption or delay or some minimal outburst, we don't think it falls within the actus reus to begin with.
My outbursts require the court to reconvene after the proceeding has been brought back into line, or the pulling of the fire alarm, the vote has to be rescheduled, or the protest outside of a courthouse makes it inaccessible for a period of time. Are those all federal felonies subject to 20 years in prison?
So with some of them, it would be necessary to show nexus. So with respect to the protest outside the courthouse, we'd have to show that, yes, they were aiming at a proceeding.
Yeah, they were trying to stop the proceeding.
Yes, and then we'd also have to be able to prove that they acted corruptly, and this sets a stringent mens rea.
And they go on like that for a while. Man, just trying to get a straight answer out of that woman. He brings up actual protests in the courtroom they've had to deal with that delayed proceedings. She went on about how it would be hard to prove when that has nothing to do with whether it actually violates a statute or not. And by the way, for every single one of those protests, the DOJ didn't prosecute a single person seeking even 1 day in jail. And then there's this bit.
And I want to emphasize, Justice Kagan, that this is a stringent mens rea requirement that has very much constrained the U.S. Attorney's Office. We've charged over 1,350 defendants with crimes committed on January 6th, but we've only had the evidence of intent to bring charges against 350.
Wow. 350 out of 1,350. Only 1 out of 4 for a mostly nonviolent protest. Such constraint! With a few exceptions, most of them showed themselves to be befuddled by simple English, and Sotomayor showed herself to be much more qualified to be a softball pitcher than a Supreme Court justice. Think about what this could mean for you and me. Any protest with any possibility of actually making a difference could fall within the government's wide interpretation of C2, Even something as simple as passing out jury nullification pamphlets outside the courthouse. There would be nothing they wouldn't be able to get you for, and only the most impotent and ineffective of protests would be allowed. I'll just play a bit of Green's rebuttal.
I would point the court to 1752, which is civil disobedience in a restricted space, which is what Mr. Fischer is charged with. That's a misdemeanor. If you cause substantial bodily injury, that is a 10-year maximum penalty. The government wants to unleash a 20-year maximum penalty on potential peaceful protests. That in and of itself is a bad idea because it's going to chill protected activities. People are going to worry about the kinds of protests they engage in, even if they're peaceful, because the government has this weapon.
We'll have to see how the court rules on it when the time comes. Hopefully smarter heads will prevail. So anyway, that's how I spent 1/14 of my Monday. How about you? If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. Okay, thanks for bearing with me through that long one. Or skipping it, whichever you did. It's all good. Now that you're back, the rest of them aren't going to be as long, I promise. I'm not even going to spend a lot of time going through that ridiculous jury selection in the Trump hush money trial. Suffice it to say, it was as bad as you think. But Jesse Waters on Fox News did a pretty good summary of some of the issues. As he explained it, one juror dropped out because she couldn't be impartial. Actually, a bunch of them did right at the beginning, but we're talking about when the voir dire of jurors actually started. Another was forced out for lying, and the prosecution asked the court to sanction Trump because he dared mention on social media what tons of news outlets were reporting. Again, everyone, including the prosecution and star witnesses, gets to publicly talk about this case except him. He played some clips from these comments from Trump. I've included a few extra here for context. He came out with a ream of paper of news stories from all over the media calling the trial a hoax and saying Bragg has no case.
I'm supposed to be in New Hampshire. I'm supposed to be in Georgia. I'm supposed to be in North Carolina, South Carolina. I'm supposed to be in a lot of different places campaigning. But I've been here all day. These are all stories. This is over the last few days from legal experts. This is Wall Street Journal editorial. But all of these are stories from legal experts saying how this is not a case. All of these stories are stories of how this is done by the experts and editorials. Bragg falsified business record, and he falsifies them. He's the one. He's the fraud. You know, we had 18 DA or DA types who were close. 18 or 19 or 21, they counted all, they were in and out like, and in the meantime, we have murders going on right outside in New York. These are all, every single one. I haven't seen one that says it's a good trial. It's political. This is a Wall Street Journal editorial, and it's a shame. The whole world is watching this hoax. You got a DA that's out of control. You have a judge that's highly conflicted. The whole thing is a mess, and you have the leading candidate and leading crooked Joe Biden by a lot. He's the one that should be in trial. He's a crook. You got a crooked president. He should be in trial with all the stuff he's done and his family. He should be at trial. But he's the one in charge. His top people are here, working with the DA's office to make sure everything goes right. But it should go right because they have no case. And that's what this is all about. And it really is a shame.
So Waters gives a good summary of the issues. One juror, a nurse, dropped out because her friends found out she was a Trump juror and started pressuring her. Another, a juror who said Trump was fascinating and mysterious and really made out like, if anything, he was a bit biased towards Trump, was accepted until it was discovered that he lied on his jury form about his criminal record. Turns out, he'd been arrested for vandalizing Republican campaign signs and was working with Democratic Mayor David Dinkins. And although more than once the judge hit the ceiling and said Trump was threatening the jurors, as Waters points out,
by the way, all of the information about these jurors comes from reporters in the room. The same things I'm reporting, so is the Washington Post, CNN, Politico. The media also knows Trump's lawyers have caught prospective jurors being sneaky. Jurors fill out forms that say they're not biased. I've never done this or that. And Trump's team keeps catching them. They've uncovered jurors posting celebrations of Trump losing. Videos of Trump that say, I'm dumb as F. Posting, lock him up. The media knows this because their own reporters reported it. Even the jurors who told the court they can totally be unbiased when they're dismissed run to the media and blast Trump.
He plays clips from one of the dismissed jurors who said she could be unbiased, but listen to the actual question and answer.
Why you felt that you could be unbiased?
I'm not a fan. I think his handling of COVID-19 was abysmal. I have a sister who's adopted from China, and the comments he made about China when he was running for president made her very anxious and therefore made me angry. There are policies he has supported that regard women and reproductive health that I do not agree with.
So when asked, how can you be unbiased, she proceeds to go on a tirade blasting Trump. This is unbiased? And she wasn't the only one. Another even said there was absolutely no way the jury could be unbiased. And this problem of the incredibly biased jury pool could be so easily mitigated just by changing the venue. You wouldn't even have to move it out of New York City. Just take it out of Manhattan to Staten Island. And yet, that was completely out of the question. If this case is so good, why do they need to have the trial in such an incredibly biased area? A good prosecutor should have nothing to fear from a fair jury pool. Do you have children, or nieces or nephews? Are you homeschooling, or just want to counter some of the socialist indoctrination most children get in school? If so, go to Bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, and you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary-aged children. The Tuttle Twins books are books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. They'll learn about the harm caused by eminent domain, or regulations passed in the name of safety, and fundamental concepts of liberty. And as you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated. They're just $9.99 a piece, or get a special discount as well as free bonuses when you purchase all 5. You can even buy in bulk to donate to schools and local libraries. So get the Tuttle Twins books at Bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins. And now it's time to exarcade this week's biggest Bogon emitter. Katherine Maher was a Chief Communications Officer of the Wikimedia Foundation, then Interim Executive Director of the Wikimedia Foundation, and then became CEO of Wikimedia. She's now CEO of NPR. Thanks to Christopher F. Rufo, we have a clip of her from a live stream explaining how she made Wikipedia abandon the idea of a free and open internet. We've covered this before, how Wikipedia went from being one of the greatest encyclopedias humanity ever created to an unreliable mess of political correctness. Anyone remember when it was found to be more accurate than Encyclopedia Britannica? Or when it blacked out its pages to protest SOPA and PIPA? Or when it sued the NSA over domestic spying? But gone are the days of bottom-up crowdsourcing replaced by a centralized group of editors overseeing the inputs of the plebes and making sure they don't put in the wrong truth. Want to know how it happened? Take a listen.
I started by talking about the idea of free and open as some of our founding principles, sort of free and open source coming from the idea of the open source community. Well, I have come to the opinion and the perspective that free and open was a way of looking at the world that was inherently limited relative to what we were trying to achieve.
And what was it they were trying to achieve other than free and open? Wasn't that the whole idea of Wikipedia?
And so what we ended up seeing was Wikipedia really rebuilt this idea of knowledge as a whole around what the Western canon.
Science and modern scholarship ended up being from the culture that created science and modern scholarship.
The idea of a written tradition, which is particular to some cultures and not to others, the ways in which we ascribe notability often really comes from sort of this white male westernized construct around who matters in societies and who is elevated in whose voices.
Yep. What have we heard before? Anything that isn't in line with her political ideology is white male westernized constructs. Evidence doesn't matter. Logic doesn't matter. Truth doesn't matter. She has a greater truth.
And so some of these ideas of sort of this radical openness really did not end up with the intention, really did not end up living into the intentionality of what openness can be.
Or what she thinks openness can be. Also, yeah, she keeps saying the word intentionality when she really means intention. And isn't that just the perfect microcosm of what the problem is? The scary thing is she's now on the board of Signal as well. That's one of the few secure texting apps we have. What could she mess up there? Understand, these changes were not made because Wikipedia wasn't working. It was because Wikipedia was working too well. It's a shame because Wikipedia was a wonderful experiment that became a wonderful resource. And it could be again. It just needs to be taken back by people who care about real openness to make it the decentralized crowdsourced repository it was always supposed to be, instead of collectivization and central planning, which always results in destruction. So all of that makes Katherine Maher this week's biggest Bogon emitter. I want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Bogosity.tv. And now let's quintuplicate this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. And it's another one for the state of New York, which utterly destroyed the best source of carbon-free power for most of the state. Indian Point Energy Center was a 3-unit nuclear power station on the east bank of the Hudson River. Its initial licenses expired in 2013 and 2015, but the NRC was granting a 20-year extension for each reactor. But that was shuttered by then-Governor Andrew Cuomo, who forced the plant to shut down in 2021, resulting in the loss of over 1,000 jobs and the state's biggest source of carbon-free power. Cuomo had weaponized all of the state's departments against it, including the Public Utility Commission, the Department of Health, and the Department of Environmental Conservation, All of these departments took political action against the plant, forcing the company, Holtec International, to tie up their resources trying to respond to them. After trying several excuses that failed utterly, the one that succeeded was no less dumb: the release of tritium into the water supply. Nuclear power plants do this. They release tritium, a radioactive isotope of hydrogen with a 12-year half-life, into the water at rates far below background level. More tritium is created in our waterways by cosmic rays that bombard the Earth than from all of the world's nuclear power plants combined. We're talking like orders of magnitude. There are other sources of tritium as well, including neon signage, that are more significant than nuclear energy, but don't seem to generate this kind of reaction from moron politicians like Cuomo. Even after the closure of the plant, last year New York Governor Kathy Hochul signed legislation stopping the plant from doing controlled releases of treated wastewater over these false tritium concerns. State Senator Pete Harcum, who authored the bill, said, quote, "They're welcome to sue." So they did, saying that this law violates the federal law that gives the NRC, quote, "sole authority over radiological discharges from nuclear power plants, whether online or decommissioning." The company said, quote, "The failure of New York State to respect federal law and follow the facts and science of the issue left us no other means for remedy. The passage of the bill has already delayed the planned completion of the decommissioning of Indian Point an additional 8 years, which hurts the local community's desire to see the project completed and the property returned as an asset for economic development in the region. We look forward to the legal process moving along on this important decision." Politicians were screeching about all of the economic harm that the tritium in the water would do to surrounding communities while not being able to speak with any knowledge at all as to what that might be. After a century of research, there has been shown to be basically no link to these small levels of tritium to cancer or any other health problems. There are other ways of disposing of the wastewater, such as trucking it out of state or evaporating it on site, but those take a lot longer and create much greater risk than controlled wastewater release. Ignoring federal law, facts, and science to bully a business they're politically opposed to? Just typical of how New York operates, which is yet another reason why so many experts are saying not to open a business in New York. So all of that makes New York this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this I Love Humans, Always Seeing Patterns in Things That Aren't There edition of the Bogosity podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at Patreon or Subscribestar, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Dixie Lee Ray. "A nuclear power plant is infinitely safer than eating because 300 people choke to death on food every year." The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Bogosity.